Okay, today we're going to start by looking at the amplitude. So the amplitude is going to be the distance from the midline to the max, or vice versa, the midline to the minimum. And so we're just looking for this height in our graph. We want to know what this height right here is. Okay. The equation, or how we're going to find that mathematically, is we're going to take the maximum height and we're going to subtract the midline, or vice versa, we can take the midline and just subtract out the minimum. To find the period, we're visually looking at the graph and trying to decide where it starts to repeat itself. So here, if I start my sine function at 0, it's going to go up, past 0 to go down, and then right here, it repeats what it just did. It goes up, and it's going to go down, and vice versa. So it's going to repeat forever. And so this distance that we're looking at from 0 to 2 pi is how long it took for it to repeat. So we're looking for that repetitive motion. When does it repeat itself? When does it start to repeat itself? You could even mark it from here. It goes down, back up, and this is where it stops. You just have to know where those points are. So maybe I could have done from negative pi, it goes down, up to here. So from negative pi to pi is also 2 pi. So it doesn't matter where you look at it, as long as you can determine that distance. Okay, so let's look at some examples. In the first graph, we're going to start by finding our amplitude, but in order to find our amplitude, we need to know what the midline is. So to find the midline, we have our maximum, which is 4, plus our minimum, which is negative 2. And we're going to divide that by 2, just like we did in the last lesson. 4 minus 2 is 2, divided by 2 is 1. So right about here, this is our midline for this function at 1. Okay. The amplitude is the height from the midline, which is at 1, up to the max. So 4 minus 1 is 3. This is going to be the amplitude. The blue was the midline. And then I'll do in orange the period. So how long until it repeats? So we start at the top, and we're just going to track until it gets back up to the top. So from there all the way down and back up gives us 4 pi. So your period is 4 pi. Okay. Same thing with the next function. We're looking for the midline. This one's a little easier to do visually. It's right here in the middle. Okay, so our midline is at y equals 0. The amplitude is that height. So I'm going to look at it here. From our midline up is 3. So the amplitude, we get that this is 3. And then finally the period. Okay, so how long until it repeats? Well, if I start here, down, up, and then that's where it would start to repeat. So I started from 0 and I went to 4 pi over 6. That would be your period. So we're going to take everything that we've done and kind of bring it all together. So we have our function, y equals 2 sine of 1/3 x minus 1. Okay. Reviewing what we did before, your midline is that value that's being added or subtracted at the end. So your midline is going to be at y equals -1, like we went over in the last lesson. So on my graph, I'm going to go down 1, and I'm going to put a dotted line all the way across to represent my midline. Your amplitude, I don't think we've looked at that in an equation yet, so let's go ahead and go into Desmos. So let me go back to Desmos. I already typed it in. So we have our equation, it's going to give us our graph, and we're going to visually decide where is, I'm going to have to draw that again, but that's fine. Where is the midline? It went away. Okay, let's retype it. So y is equal to 2. I'm not typing anything because that is on. Y is equal to 2 sine of 1/3 x minus 1. Okay, so now we have our function. Let me change some settings really quick so you can see what's going on. Where's the keyboard? Okay, so we have our graph. The midline, let me just stretch this out a little bit. We're looking for the center. So if you guys, I'm trying to stretch it so it'll show all the numbers. There it is. So we can see that our height is 1 and our max is 1 and our minimum is -3. So our midline is going to be in the middle of that, which is at 1 right here. This is our midline. The amplitude is that height right here. So we went up 1, 2 to get there. Okay, so our amplitude is going to be 2. If you look back at the equation, you'll notice that that happens to be the number out front. And then the period, if we start here at 0, when x is 0, we're going to go up, down, and this is where it starts to repeat at 6 pi. That's going to be our period. So if we go back to our graph, we're going to sketch kind of what we found. Okay, so our midline we said was at y equals -1, and then at -1 we have a dotted line. Go ahead and put that back. Our amplitude we said was 2, and we noticed that it happened to be right there. And then finally the period we said was 6 pi. And so we're just going to graph what that looked like. So going back to Desmos if you need to, our graph doesn't have to be perfect, but we're just going to show that it went up and down and ended here. And then you just label some of these points. So our height was at +1, I'm sorry. Height was at +1. Our max was at +1, our minimum was at 3, and then some of these important points like we explored in our creating the unit circle unit. Okay, those 5 points we need to label. So this x value is at 0. This x value is here, 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 and here we want to look at. So since we ended at 6 pi, we're just splitting that up. So if that's 6 pi, then half of that is 3 pi. Half of that is 3 pi halves, so I'm just dividing it by 2. And if I go a little bit further, we're going to get something halves. So you can put this into your calculator. Just do 3 halves plus 3. If you'd like to put that in your calculator, I'm going to do it in my head really fast. So that's going to be 9 pi halves is what you should get. So those would be your labels for the x-axis. Your labels on your y-axis are there. Make sure you label what your midline, amplitude, and period look like as well.